Hey guys, Michael from Cobber vs Glass, and today we're going to be looking at the best mobile games available for both Android and iOS. So, let's take a look. I'm going to start off by going over the features of each of these games, starting off with Asphalt 8. Now in Asphalt 8, it's a very arcade style racer. You've got some events that you can go to, which are daily events. You've also got a multiplayer feature which allows you to pick any car from any class as long as you've unlocked it and take the play online. In the play options, you can see here that you've got 8 different tiers with multiple races in it. Now, maybe that you have to use a certain car or do a certain task or elimination, but overall the track selection and the actual races themselves are quite varied, which I do appreciate. In terms of the car selection, it is incredible. You've got so many cars included with this game. You've got different classes from D, C, B, A and also S, which I'm guessing stands for supercars, and each car is also customizable, so you can change things like the drive transmission, the suspension, the brakes, the nitros, and you can also do things like change the color of the car as well. Now that's pretty much as far as the customization goes, but it's quite easy to get used to. Next up on the list is Colin McRae Rally. Now this has the least amount of features. You've got settings, you've got exit the game, and you've also got the single player mode. Unfortunately there is no multiplayer. Now you are going to have things like championship, single rally, and also single stage, so there are some options there. Now once you go into either one of these, you're going to be presented with countries which have tracks in them for you to race on. So there's quite a lot of tracks to race on, there's quite a lot of different varied locations. You've got some concrete, and if you want to race on that in say Germany, you've got Africa for dirt levels and things like that. But overall the game itself is quite varied in terms of what it offers, although be it quite limited with the track selection and also the number of cars you can have. In total you've got a Ford Focus, Subaru Impreza, Mitsubishi Lancer, a Lacia, and that's pretty much it. So you've only got pretty much 4 cars to choose from. So in terms of the car selection, it's not that great, but hopefully they might update it with some new additional cars, as the PC version had a lot more in terms of functionality and also features. Thirdly is Need for Speed. Now with this one, all you have is the story mode. There's no multiplayer, there's no single race. If you're going to do any racing within this game, it's going to be in the story mode, and once you've completed that, all you're going to have to do is replay these story missions. Now you've got the map, you've got the garage, which offers quite a large selection of cars, although some of them are quite expensive, so you do have to play the game quite a lot to get the money to actually buy these cars, which is definitely a disappointment. You've then got your driver detail, so it tells you your progression in the game. You've then also got your most wanted level, so it tells you how far you've gone in terms of your rivals. And you've also got the store, where you can buy in-game credits by using real-world money. You've then got options, and then lastly you've got the option to exit the game. It has its own specific button, which is definitely a bit strange. You can tell it's an older game from Android. But in terms of the map itself, once you go into an area, you can see there are multiple races to do within that area. Some require certain cars or certain specifics to actually do the races. So this one here, for instance, you can see that I can use a multiple variety of cars. Although if I go back to this race, you can see it's only going to let me use the Hummer because it is a 4x4 race. So it's only going to let me use this one specific car during that race, which can sometimes be a bit annoying if you just want to race a different car on a different track. You may have to find a specific race to race that specific car that you want to actually use. So it can be a bit annoying in that sense. Now the cars are upgradable before each race, and you can also change the paint on them. But the selection of cars is definitely more real world than what you're going to get with something like Asphalt 8. So every car that you see here you can pretty much buy. There are a couple of concept cars, but overall the car selection is quite good. Which then brings us on to the Gran Turismo of mobile gaming, which is Real Racing 3. Now with Real Racing 3 you've got different stages within the game itself, and again these stages require you to have specific cars, but it's not necessarily a bad thing with Real Racing because it's more like championship events, but you can actually use multiple cars within each race, which is definitely a nice feature. Now some require you to drive a single car as opposed to having multiple options, but you can see here that the options that you get within a race is definitely nice. You've got some concept cars, some high performance cars, and also some muscle cars as well. But overall the track selection is very good. It's all real world tracks, also the cars are all real world cars as well, and it also has a feature called time shifted multiplayer, which basically means if one of your friends plays a race, when you then get to play that race, you may actually see them as an opposition within that game, which is definitely a nice feature, although it's not necessarily multiplayer. There's no real world multiplayer, no one-on-one action or anything like that, so I'd like to see them implement that maybe in a future update, and hopefully they will. Next up, we have the gameplay of each of these racing games. Now, Asphalt 8 to start with is very arcade. You've got a nitros button, you do a lot of drifting, you need to knock opponents out, but overall the game looks incredible. The graphics are really good, the particle effects are nice, the car models and also the locations are extremely nice, and you can see here from this shot that the lighting effects are incredible as well. Now, one thing that I would say is it's a very high octane, very fast paced game. So if you are used to something like Real Racing 3, then this may not be the game for you, as it can take some getting used to. The way that you play the game is a lot of drifting, a lot of knocking down opponents to get to the finish line. It's not as easy as just racing the best. You actually have to use a lot of skill with drifting around some large corners to build up your nitros meter to then actually get some added boost to beat your opponents. Next up is Colin McRae, and this is probably one of the hardest ones to actually control. Unfortunately, you can't move around any of the on-screen buttons, and I find that in the bottom left-hand corner to turn both left and right, they are a bit too close together and very far in the corner, so you do have to kind of be aware of where you're placing your fingers. Now with this though, it is pretty much all manual. You've got the accelerator and the brake on the right hand side as well as the handbrake, but overall the graphics are quite nice. I mean, if you remember the PC version, it's pretty much a direct port, so it's not necessarily going to be as good as some of these other games that we're looking at today, but overall the graphics are nice. The controls themselves are definitely a bit airy is what I'd call them, so occasionally when you tap to turn left or right, the car can sometimes take a while to respond, which is definitely a problem. And the actual motion control, so instead of using on-screen buttons, you can use the accelerometer in your phone. I wouldn't recommend that at all, because for some reason there is crazy lag when using the accelerometer with Colin McRae. So again, hopefully they can see that and update that at some stage. For an older generation Android game, the graphics for Need for Speed are actually really nice. If you've played the console version, you may not be able to tell the difference at a distance. As you can see here, you've got some very nice blur effects, and also the car models and the environments are definitely very nice, if be it a bit grey and boring. A lot of the tracks do look very similar. You do have the option though for night and day races, which definitely gives it some variation in the long run, but overall the gameplay is nice. I would recommend using it with the accelerometer because the controls are really tight. You're not going to have any issues with this, and you're not going to be having any frustrations while playing the game. You swipe up on the right hand side to get a nitros boost, and also you can use that for the drifting mechanic as well, which is definitely a lot different from something like Asphalt 8, as it requires you to actually learn the corners and the actual courses to get that drift just right. But overall, Need for Speed definitely does look good, and for an older generation game, some newer games could actually learn from it. And lastly, we come to Real Racing 3, which, as I've mentioned previously, is the Gran Turismo of racing games. Now, I'm not sure how they've got the visuals to look as good as they do. For a mobile game, it looks incredible, but one thing I would say is if you are going to be playing on iOS, on an iPhone or an iPad, you're actually going to get a better experience than on an Android device. Now, I'm not sure why. I've tried this on both an HTC One M8 and also my Nexus 5, which are definitely not slouch when they come to the processor and just in general the graphics performance, but the iPhone for some reason outperforms them. It's a lot smoother, the frame rate is better, and you also get some additional features in terms of some reflections and things. But overall the game is nice. The one thing that I would say is this is the best game in terms of visuals if you're looking for that, and the car models are definitely the best of any racing game that I've ever tried. All the tracks themselves are incredible as well, and they're all real world tracks, and you can actually pretty much compare them to those real world tracks and not really see a difference. In terms of the verdict for what is the best Android racing game, I want you guys to tell me what you think is the best. Obviously, in my opinion, Real Racing 3 takes the crown. You got the massive amount of cars to choose from, the real life tracks, and also the fact that the graphics look incredible. Next up, it would have to be followed by Real Racing 8, again for mainly the same reasons as Real Racing 3, so you've got great visuals, great cars and tracks, but it's got a more arcadey feel, and you can kind of pick up and play it a bit more easy than you can Real Racing. You don't have to be as invested in the game. Colin McRae would then follow in third place just for the fact of nostalgia. I played it quite a lot on PC when it originally came out, so the fact that I can play it when I'm on a bus or just out and about is definitely a great feature to have now that it's available for mobile. Last up would have to be Need for Speed Most Wanted. Now don't get me wrong, when I had the original Nexus 7 and Need for Speed Most Wanted came out, I was playing it quite a lot. It was definitely a great game at the time. But there's now more better games, more visually impressive games, and also games that take advantage of the full screen on a Nexus device. Both Real Racing 3 and Asphalt 8 take advantage of what's called immersion mode, so it takes up the full screen and you don't have the navigation buttons down the side. But overall guys, please do leave me down in the comments what is your favourite racing game for any mobile platform. All the games I've mentioned today are available for both Android and iOS and can be available in the Play Stores and also the App Store right now. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. I'm Michael from Copper vs Glass. This has been my quick look at the best Android racing games, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.